Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Speak Plainly podcast, where we speak plainly about things that matter. I'm your host, Owl Medicine, and today is going to be a continuation of what we talked about last week. Last week, we talked about boundaries. We talked about what boundaries are, why it matters, why everyone needs boundaries, whether you are chronic stress adapted or not, and why everyone that we know is terrible at boundaries. It's just not a thing that we are taught. It doesn't make sense on a grand scale to teach everyone in a civilization to be really good at saying no, because the civilization itself would suffer to some degree. There wouldn't be as much advancement and all that sort of thing unless people were happy to just chug along doing what they're told to do. And that's great, fine, and wonderful. I appreciate having paved roads and a cell phone and all of the incredible tech that we have today that our civilization has provided. The same tech that I'm using today, in fact, on this podcast. Which brings me to a little point. I'm trying to record this in a new location. I normally move everything from my office, where I do all of my work, back to my bedroom because it's a little bit quieter. But today, it doesn't actually seem to be quieter. I can deal with either the sound of traffic in the front office, because I live right on the 101, or I can deal with the sound of some new neighbor's tiny husky puppy who was adorable, but I don't like whiny dogs. I don't care if they're full-size dogs or not. If your dog can't shut up, it annoys me. So I am trying to do something new today with the recording and everything. I wasn't really thrilled with the quality of the sound in my last podcast. If you guys could give me some feedback, I would greatly appreciate that feedback, because I'm kind of doing this in a black hole. I haven't found, outside of friends texting me stuff about this, I haven't heard a single thing from a single person who's listened to any of my episodes. We have hundreds of downloads now, over 500 downloads, and I haven't heard anything about what people think. And I would really like that. I would like to know what it is that you think about it, what we're covering, what you like what you don't like, what I might be able to do better or do differently, because I started this in lots of fear and just doing it anyway and being like, I'm just gonna start getting my stuff out there. And I think that was a wonderful thing. Now I've been able to do it regularly enough and get comfortable enough that I would love to be able to cater what I'm talking about to the people who are willing to take time out of their very busy schedules to listen to me blab. So if you're listening to me blab right now and you have some questions, some curiosities, some topics that you would like me to discuss on future episodes, then please let me know. I would appreciate that. You can leave a comment on whatever platform you're listening to this on, and I would love to start adapting to your feedback. All right, and moving on to the topic at hand today. The topic at hand today is non-negotiables. Last week we talked a lot about boundaries, and this week it's an extension of that conversation. Last week I called boundaries fences. I call them fences because they separate me from you. They provide a line in the sand, so to speak, that allows me to love myself and love you at the same time. A non-negotiable boundary is a fence that you know will never ever move, or at least not for a very, 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 very long time. You see, many of us, chronic stress adapted people, people who have survived trauma, especially if the type of trauma that you experienced is that big T trauma, there's a particular event that you can remember that was especially traumatic for you. It is human nature to avoid being hurt in the same way, because fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. Right? It's human nature to want to avoid that pain. It's a good survival technique in general to avoid pain. We do that by putting up boundaries. But those boundaries they're fudgeable. Like, it takes time and effort to move those fences and to move those boundaries, but there are some that need not be moved. We call those non-negotiables. Now, what exactly does that mean? That means that it's a boundary that you're never going to change. You're never going to change your mind on. You're never going to one day wake up and be like, oh, hey, you know that thing I've been doing for 25 years? I don't feel like doing it anymore. Or that thing I've been protecting myself from for the entire time that you've known me, I no longer feel like I need to be protected from that. And that can happen, but very rarely, and usually a long, 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 long way into the relationship. Like, by the time you're geriatric, you might start being concerned about that. But that's why they're called non-negotiables, is they don't change, and they don't need to change. And the reason that that's important for us is because for many traumatized people, in order to get through life, you had to just shut it down. You had to learn to just shut shit down in yourself and simultaneously be able to look inside other people and see what's happening so you can predict what's happening around you. Which makes sense because you have to predict things cognitively now because you've shut off your ability to intuit things. Because when you shut off your ability to sense what's happening in your own body, you cut off your ability to intuit stuff. That's what intuition is. That's what emotions are, is their intuitions based on previous experiences that may not be conceptualized in the same way. So when you cut that stuff out, you force yourself to have to do all of your predicting. You force yourself to do all of your predicting cognitively and not allowing any of the wisdom of your body to respond because, well, frankly, the wisdom of your body wasn't very useful at that point in time. So now you have this piece of wisdom in your body that is protecting your deepest wounds. If you have a story that you never share with anybody, except maybe those closest to you, and maybe not, that story, there should be a gate in front of that story. In the healing process, we have to share our story with people who have earned the right to hear that story. If you share a traumatizing story with someone who has never been traumatized whatsoever, their eyes are going to bug out of their head and you're going to feel worse than you did before you opened up. We have to share our stories with people who can understand the gravity of it and understand the strength and grit that it takes to get through that. We need those gatekeepers. We need to be careful on who we share our stories with, and we need to be equally careful with who we allow close enough to us to be able to even have a chance at re-injuring those most injured parts of us. So that gatekeeper in this case is non-negotiables. Let me give you an example to make this clear. I use the example in the book of I need to be able to sing. I need to be able to sing my freaking heart out and sing my face off and do it badly. I need to be able to express myself freely, whether you like the sound of it or not. I sing all the time. I love singing. It's probably my favorite thing to do. Singing and studying are like, that's it, man. I freaking love it. So I can do it all day. I can do it all day and all night and be super happy. And it's not going to always sound great because I need to do warm-ups and I need to do warm-downs. And in order to extend or like yourself, in order to grow or get better at something, you have to fail at it. So I still have to let my voice break. I still have to make sounds that aren't appealing to the ear. I need to be able to do these things because I deeply value my relationship with music, and I have a story that is really painful around my relationship with music. And that story is the reason that I wound up writing a book and doing all the things that I've done and doing this podcast rather than just becoming a musician. So I have damage around becoming a musician because of a conversation I had with my mother when I was a kid. And because of that damage, I am very protective of my need to express myself. So for me, the non-negotiable is I'm gonna sing, I'm gonna play music, I'm gonna make weird loud noises, and if you're not okay with that, then we're not a fit. We just aren't. I don't give a shit how silly that is. I don't give a shit how much it bothers you or doesn't bother you, or you like it or you don't like it. All of those things do not matter. None of it matters one iota. Because I have to experience safety while expressing myself, because that is exactly what was stolen from me as a child. I could not express myself and feel safe. You can get mad all you want, I could get mad all I want, and I have. I spent many years very angry over this, at my mother, my father, but especially in this case about my mother, because it was my mother who had primary custody. And it was her that didn't allow me to do these things, at least in my head. Now I recognize that she had no effing idea how to express herself either. She was impressively trained to not do that at all. She was supposed to be a good Christian woman. I mean, when her and my father got married, their honeymoon was to have a bonfire in the backyard where they burnt all of her pants because women are supposed to be barefoot, pregnant, and in the kitchen. She wasn't allowed to wear breeches because breeches were man's clothes. So there's an idea as to where I come from. So me not being able to express myself is still a much, much greater step up than that. You know? Like, she had it far worse than I did, and it's every parent's job to just do slightly better, hopefully, to do slightly better than their parents did. And my grandparents were wonderful people, and I think probably wonderful parents. From the relationship they have with their kids, I would say that they were wonderful parents. They were definitely wonderful grandparents, but the world that they lived in had certain expectations, and those expectations formed the basis of the personality of the children they raised. That's what culture is. That's what society and civilization does and seeks to do, is train people to be a certain way because that's the way that it is, and we want things to continue on in that way. We don't want our damage to continue on the same way it has. So we have to protect it. That's why we use non-negotiables. So for me, when I enter a relationship, it is absolutely paramount. It is non-negotiable that I express to them, I will sing, I will play, I will laugh, I will be loud, I will be expressive. And if you don't like that, then there's no reason for us to even entertain each other. No matter how much I like you, no matter how sexy you are to me, no matter what I think our future could be, no matter how big that D is, no matter how good it is, I do not care. Let me rephrase that. I do care, but it still doesn't matter. That's irrelevant. I still feel the desire to be like, oh no, it's fine. It's inappropriate for me to think that I can just wander around the house squawking and squalling all day and it not annoy someone else. That's a totally valid thought. That's a totally fair and valid thing. It is equally valid to then contradict that with any person that wants to be with me, all of me, will see and know and understand the damage that I have and want to not make that worse and want to help me heal it, or at least not make it worse. Which means they need to be okay with that. Relationships are fundamentally unfair in this way. They're fundamentally unfair because you have to kind of give up little pieces of your reactions and how you feel about certain things because it's beneficial to the other person as a whole. Because it helps them feel whole, helps them be whole and have peace. So what are your non-negotiables? What are the things that matter so much to you that when you're alone, at least, when you're single, you go, this is absolutely paramount, but then when you fall in love, you start to let slip? What are those things in your life? We all have them. And we all let them slip because it's hard. But we do. We let them slip. We let things slide when maybe we shouldn't. But we're human, so maybe we also shouldn't expect ourselves to be perfect. Maybe we should all over ourselves. Just like boundaries are what everybody's really missing right now. And if you struggle with boundaries the way I have struggled with boundaries in my life, I would say get yourself a non-negotiable first, especially as a chronic stress adapted person or a person from a rough childhood or a rough past, somebody who's survived some shit, seen some shit. The first thing that you need to do is find a non-negotiable for yourself. Something where you can say, no, this was genuinely harmful enough that I deserve that this doesn't hurt me again. Or at least that the people closest to me don't re-injure me, and stick to that. Because just like with the boundaries, what it does is it teaches you your own worth. Because a non-negotiable is a boundary. It's just a boundary that you will not move for anyone. So what could you do? What boundary might you be able to come up with for yourself that is a full stop? That just says, this is my hard limit. I'm not going to do these things. Another one for me that's easy, comes right off the top of my head as I'm rolling things around, wondering what else to say. Another thing that becomes clear for me, or another example from my life, is drinking. I can't be around somebody who drinks regularly. I can't do it. I have been sober since 2016 from alcohol, and although it's not how it used to be, it's much easier, and I can, like, occasionally have a glass of white wine or something, which is not at all what I used to drink. I used to only do, dark liquors, whiskey, and red wine mostly. But now, every once in a great while, I can allow myself to have a glass of white wine. And that's only possible after years of sobriety, where I would not touch any alcohol at all. Not even tinctures, not nothing. Like zero alcohol. Because I had tried quitting before and I had failed every time. Because I always was like, oh, well, one drink won't hurt. And it took 4 years of being sober before I could do the one drink won't hurt thing and then enforce myself to, I don't care how I feel after this, but I really love the experience of having a marvelous glass of wine with an exquisitely prepared meal. When those things match together, it is absolute heaven for me. And that was a goal of mine to get back to, was that I would be able to enjoy alcohol as a food item. Not as a intoxicant even, but as an incredible tasting food item. So I had to have a non-negotiable with myself for many years with my alcohol, and no alcohol at all, zero. And then over time, and only in certain situations where I felt I was good and I knew I was safe and I was feeling good but not great, right? If any of you are familiar, if any of you are addicts, then you know that it's always the time that you feel the best or the worst that you wind up falling right back into using and abusing whatever your drug of choice is. So I make sure I'm not at a super high when I do consume alcohol, and I make sure I'm also not at a low when I consume any alcohol. It only comes with dinner, and it's only white wine, and it's only high quality stuff, because I want it to be an enjoyable experience, because I'm not going to get the buzz from it. That's not the point. I'm going to get the experience of the alcohol. And I mean, after years of not drinking at all, I can feel a little something after a glass of white wine, and it's nice. It feels good, but I know that I have to stop there. And the only reason I've been able to do this and to work my way backward to the ability to be able to consume some small amount of alcohol after abusing it for most of my life, it's been amazing to be able to do that. I specifically remember a story talking to this guy years ago, who is another alcoholic. He's been sober for close to 35 years, maybe even close to 40 years now. It was like 25 at the time. That was a while ago. And I asked him and said, do you think there could ever come a point in which you might be able to consume alcohol but have a totally different relationship with it, where you can have respect for it and it won't overrun your life? And he was kind of offended and told me that that was a very naive question to ask. And that stung a little bit, because I was young and naive and didn't like being told that, because I was also very smart, and not nearly as naive as most people my age at that time. So I was a bit offended. But that comment stuck with me. That day stuck with me. That man it's incredible. His name's Larry, and he is stuck with me. Since that experience, I kept wondering for myself, and for me, life is one giant experiment. So, if life is one giant experiment, that makes me the scientist. So, that makes me the mad scientist, which means I'm gonna experiment on myself, because experimenting on other people is a little morally questionable. So, I am more limited in who I can experiment on, so I experiment on myself. And as a good scientist, any good scientist needs to take careful notes. So, again, if I haven't told you already, take good notes about everything that you do. Write stuff down, do journals, make video blogs, whatever, but take good notes. Because when you go back to think about things way later, it'll be quite useful. But that instant with Larry stuck with me so well, I didn't need to write much of it down. I did anyway. And I pondered it for years, until I finally was in a situation where I had to stop drinking, really struggled to stop drinking like I had before, but finally stuck to it. And after 4 years of a non-negotiable, where I knew that I would fall back into those terrible habits if I engaged with alcohol, I was able to start making a difference. start making a change toward the goal that I wanted, which was to be able to enjoy alcohol not as an intoxicant or a way to become inebriated or get a head change, but as a tasty, artisanal craft beverage. So, after my long bout of non-negotiable, of being non-negotiable with it, I slowly opened up myself for the possibility to do that, but in totally different circumstances. And I went about it smartly. At first, it was only while I was traveling internationally, and only when with a group of people and a group of newly found friends, staying at a hostel or whatever. That was one place, that was the first place, really, that I allowed myself to have alcohol, was overseas during special occasions. And I know this feels like a long and off-track story, but I promise it's not. Because the moral of the story is the moral of non-negotiables. Anything that we know, like anything that you say that you know 100% for sure, is limiting. It limits you, because whatever we know, we can only know from one perspective in one bucket. You know, truth is the big truths anyway are all relative, if not all truths being relative. So even the truths like I was traumatized, that is a truth for someone who's been traumatized. Or saying, I've been traumatized by this situation, and therefore I deserve this protection, is all absolutely true. But in everything in life, there's a give and take. And at first, it's the give, right? And what we're doing is we're giving ourselves the protection and the care and the consideration that we should have been given a very, very long time ago. And we must give that to ourselves for as long as we can, until that giving becomes a take. Because everything is a two-edged sword, right? Any addiction is only an addiction once it becomes a problem. Till then, it's just a coping mechanism. And those are good things, right? So in the same way, our non-negotiables, although I know I've spent this entire episode talking to you about how they never, ever, ever need to be moved, that is how you need to set up non-negotiables, with the understanding maybe years down the line, for at the minimum, years down the line, you might want to change them. I would like to be able to sing around the house and not have this fear sitting in my heart that if I'm interrupted, I'm going to feel the ultimate rejection. Because as silly as it sounds, that's totally what it feels like. It feels like I'm receiving the ultimate form of rejection. And I don't want to feel that. And if I'm worried about that happening, that steals joy from my moment. That takes. Right? We're giving ourselves the protection, but after years and years and years of that, of nobody's going to interrupt me because I deserve this, because I was traumatized, can lead us down a road in which we're going, well, I was a traumatized person and I deserve better. I deserve these things. And then when we get very handsy, we get grabby with shit. We get grabby with our friends. We get grabby with our attention. We get grabby with time. We get grabby and we get needy. And that's the taking. And when that starts to happen, or we feel that beginning to happen, we move from this giving to this taking. And what that does, that negative side, that less nice side, is taking. It's taken our joy from us. It's taken the purpose of the non-negotiable away to some degree. Because by this point, you already know and you feel inside your body that you deserving of this space for me, that expression. I am deserving of the ability to express myself. Now, I know that I'm deserving of this because now I've been doing it long enough, I can kind of feel it deep inside. So it will be a practice of mine to eventually start working my way toward trying to be less triggerable when it comes to my music. Now, that is a future me problem down the road, but that's what I do, right? I think about this stuff and I try to figure out systems for it because I like systems. It's the way my brain thinks. It's easier for me to learn how a system works and then look up the details, and that can allow me to look up the details if I need to, and then those two things combined, the details plus what I know of the basic functionings of the system, can allow me to have a pretty good guesstimate for whatever it is that I'm trying to understand. So for me, that systems thinking totally works out. And that's what I'm doing now, as I'm looking at my future and going, I am going to have to integrate this. And maybe have to is the wrong word. But for me, I'm going to want to integrate it. I'm going to want to let go of that non-negotiable, but like 30 years from now. Because I'm always seeking to try to become the most perfect version of myself, and trying to do that in a way that's not pushy or judgy, which is really effing hard because I'm naturally a very pushy and a very judgy person. That Virgo South Node and all of my fire from being a quintuple Sagittarius, I can be pushy and judgy real easy. And I'm trying to not do that with myself. So I'm allowing myself to have the space to think about that, which is funny because I know I've been talking this whole time about how these non-negotiables you really have to stick to. And that is the takeaway. I'm personally at a place where I'm looking down the line, like way down the line at it. But the only reason that that's even an option is because it was genuinely non-negotiable for years. Absolutely, utterly non-negotiable. Another non-negotiable of mine, and this happened with my ex and friend most recently, Michael. When he and I first got together, I don't even remember what the thing was about, but he said something to me, and I about flipped out. I got very big, very loud, and very serious. Actually, I didn't even get that loud, but I felt like I got very big and I got very serious, very firm, very stern, and with a lot of pinched energy said that you will never lie to me. That's another non-negotiable. That's a killer. For me, you cannot lie to me. If you are lying to me for any reason, I don't care what that reason is, I'm not okay with it. The way I live my life is I want to know how you feel. The good, the bad, the ugly, it doesn't matter. I understand how fucked up life is. I understand how fucked up psychology is. I understand how twisted and weird this traumatized, crazy world can be. I understand that our cognitive selves are often very, very at odds with our emotional selves, and that the things that we feel don't make sense, and that the things that we think sometimes don't make sense. And when we say, I want this, or I feel that, or I love this, or I hate that almost every time we're speaking about some piece of ourselves and not the entire thing. So I will be very happy to take all of the honesty up front, no matter how painful it is, because like boundaries, I'm all about choosing discomfort now over resentment later. I've held far too much resentment in my life, especially toward my family. It's a waste of energy. I'm not down for that resentment anymore. So I want to know everything up fucking front. You cheated on me? Cool. let me know. Like, you lied to me, let me know. You screwed up at this, that, or the other thing, that's fine, let me know. You're mad at me, you think I'm full of shit, and you're absolutely infuriated, and you don't want to look at my face, let me know. That's totally fine. You can be like, I need you to get the fuck out of my face right now. I'll be like, all right, I'm fine with that. We're human beings, which means we're animals. We react like animals. So for me, being brutally honest is a fundamental aspect of my personality, and I try to take the brutality out of it now. That's a fairly new, as recent as last 4 or 5 years, it made me better at that. But honesty, no matter how blunt, is always the best policy in my book. So for me, that's another non-negotiable, is I need you to be honest with me. It's a very weird world that we live in, and we've got lots of things to say yes to and lots of things to say no to. And the reality is, if you want to say yes to anything in your life, you have to say no to 90% of the rest of it. Whatever it is that you want to do, it will take time and energy. And you have so much love. We all have a lot of love in our hearts, and love wants to be shared. That's all it wants to do. Love is that desire to connect intimately and profoundly with another person. That's all that any of us really wants to do with love, and love is an infinite resource, but energy is finite. We only have so much energy to move through our day with, and to accomplish our goals with, to feed ourselves with, both literally and figuratively. So we have to be careful with our chi. So we have to be able to say no to things. You have to be able to say no, in fact, to almost everything that isn't paramount to you and your growth. You got to say no to things. And most of us are really bad at saying no to things, especially chronic stress adapted people. So we need boundaries so we can learn to say no. But the reason we don't have boundaries is from these traumatic instances. And the most traumatic instances, we ought to have non-negotiable boundaries around them. So that's where I say all of this begins. Figure out for yourself what your non-negotiables are. Think of the stories from your past, the ones that were the absolute most painful. Think of the top 2 or 3. At least one. And come up with a way that you can protect yourself, regardless of how it affects another person. And that's the key. Non-negotiables, boundaries too, but especially non-negotiables, they need to occur in order to be functional. They need to occur irrespective of another person, irrespective of another person's view or perspective or what they think or how they feel. Non-negotiables exist for you and for yourself only. And it only isn't fair if we assume that the other person doesn't have any non-negotiables. That they're just like, oh, I'm fine. It's fine. I think the reality is that we all do have non-negotiables, but we don't call them that. We think they're negotiable, or that we're like, well, in the right circumstances, I won't do this, or I don't behave that way. But I think most of us who are damaged anyway, most of us have non-negotiables, but we don't call it that. And by not calling it that, that's basically, it's just stubbornness, right? Our stubbornness gets us into trouble, and typically we're stubborn around the things that have hurt us before. We don't want to be hurt again, so we're stubborn about protecting ourselves. If we move that natural, innate practice into a conscious, cognitive practice, then we heal ourselves much faster. Trauma lives in the body, right? But spirit is the combination of the mind, the emotion, and the body. When all 3 of those act as one, that is spirit. Healing is a spiritual process. The trauma lives in the body. Fortunately / unfortunately, the body can separate from the mind. We call this dissociation. Dissociation is a very common survival strategy for all things. Possums play dead as a mimicry of dissociation. Dissociation is a mimicry of playing dead, so we can protect ourselves. So if healing is a spiritual process, then we need to have all of the pieces of us functioning in unison simultaneously. So you can't just do the somatic piece and think that that's enough. It's not, because all of you needs to heal. And the way that you do that is by integrating all the parts of you. So that trauma that lives in your body needs to be protected, but it needs to be protected consciously. You need to know that you're protecting yourself and that that's actually what you're doing, instead of just being able to flippantly reply that, yeah, I must be protecting myself. You need to know. You need to actually know and care. You need to give a shit that that's what you're doing for yourself. Because only by doing that, are you going to realize that somebody actually gives a shit? And then you can heal from that. So if we move this process from being a subconscious, innate process of becoming stubborn around the things that have injured us before, and we move that to a conscious process of making those things non-negotiables, then we not only provide the attention and the care that we didn't have, that is the fuel that allows us to heal, it brings in the cognitive realm into your physiological realm, healing that dissociation, melding those pieces back together. Trauma may be stored in the body, but healing is a spiritual experience, which means it has to include all of you. So we have to move this stuff to our conscious worlds. And then, once we're conscious of it for a very, 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 very long time, and we have swaddled the traumas that we have survived, we've swaddled them in soft clothing and catered to them and said, that was uncool, that was not nice, you should not have been treated that way. And then you provide the experiential proof of you should not have been treated that way by actively not allowing yourself to be treated that way cognitively. That's how we heal. Eventually, down the road, once we've healed profoundly, then we can consider renegotiating our non-negotiables. But I feel like a non-negotiable should honestly minimum, like when you set up your non-negotiable, it needs to be a non-negotiable for a minimum of 5, probably 10 years. That this is a thing that is in my life that probably at least 10 years, honestly. Because the damage is super real and it's there and it's in your brain stem. Like, the automations of your reactions are based on the fundamental structures of your brainstem, which were built, they were fabricated at a very young age, in which your assumptions were not under your control. They were simply the most natural physiological assumptions that a person with very little or no prefrontal cortex can make. The thing to understand about non-negotiable boundaries is that you already do them. It's an innate response to protect oneself. But that innate response is innate because the body took care of it for you. Healing with the big H is a spiritual experience. The faster, if you want to heal quickly, you need to bring in all the pieces of you to experience something simultaneously. So you have to bring the cognition into it. You got to recognize what you're doing and why you're doing it. And then maintain that recognition over time to see if the why you're doing it changes. If maybe that piece of you feels stronger, feels less vulnerable. You got to bring it all in consciously. You have to make those non-negotiables known to yourself and known to anybody that you're going to especially live with. Because non-negotiables are really only going to be engaged with by those who are the closest to you. So you gotta let folks know up front what they are, which means you have to know what they are. You're already doing it, so maybe you can start there. That could get a little confusing. So if you can't start there, or if that does wind up getting confusing, ask yourself what experience harmed you in a way that has really lasted and brings you pain, and you want to avoid that pain. Build your brick wall there. Build your non-negotiable there. Know why you're doing it. Know exactly what it's for. And watch that vulnerable piece of you. Watch it grow stronger. Watch that thin skin get thicker. And before it gets too thick, say 10 years from now, then you can consider pulling that up. Letting the air get to it. Preventing that wound from getting too big of a scar tissue or from keloiding. Let it heal just as much as it needs to. And then we can let off the gas. But that's 10 years down the line. So there's non-negotiables. Up front, through the middle, all the way to the end. We all need them. They're extremely important, especially for people who have survived really troublesome experiences. Thank you for joining me, and thanks for hanging out with me today. I hope that you enjoyed today's podcast. Leave a comment. I'd love to hear from my audience. You guys are awesome. It blows my mind still that people want to just drop in and listen to me ramble about things that I find interesting. I think it's marvelous, and I really appreciate your time. So let me know what you're interested in, and I would love to cover those things. If you like the podcast, consider donating on Patreon, or consider clicking the Buy Me a Coffee link, and I'd be greatly appreciated. I am moving to, as I mentioned before, this microphone is getting fuzzier and fuzzier in its sound, I think, because I just keep using it over and over again. So I'm going to have to upgrade my stuff soon. So if you want to help me do that so you can enjoy a better sound quality, then consider donating. And if not, screw it. Don't. Who cares? It's just a way to pass time. I hope that you guys really did enjoy the show. And I love you all. Thank you for listening. And remember, stay curious and stay uncomfortable.